Okay, good afternoon, good morning, and good night, no matter where you are. And like I said earlier, we very much appreciate you folks sticking around to see our presentation today. Feel free to put a question in the chat as we're going forward. But we are just a few minutes behind, so we're going to go ahead and get going. First of all, the agenda, next slide, we'll introduce ourselves. We'll talk about SEL. We're an education nonprofit, outward-facing group that's based at the University of Indianapolis. And when we get to that slide, my colleagues will talk about that. We're going to talk about dual credit in early college in Indiana and how that is a little bit different than most places. Barriers and strategies in dealing with partnerships and the benefits of improving those partnerships between high schools and higher ed institutions. We hope that you will see at the end what barriers exist and the various ways that these partnerships can be strengthened and how both your high schools and higher ed would benefit. As you can see down at the bottom, if you would please, now that we're all here or we're all getting here, if you could type in the chat box what state you're from, what type of organization do you represent? Are you a high school person, higher ed, state agency, other, which is what we often have to do when we have these questions asked to us, and what role do you play in your organization? And to get started, my name is Steve Combs. I'm a senior coordinator for early college here at SEL. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues now so they can introduce themselves.
Hi there, I'm Janet Boyle. I serve as the director of the Rural Early College Network at SEL. Prior to that, I was the executive director at SEL as well as some other roles. And then I have worked in higher ed as well as K through 12 in my career. And my colleague, Sandy Hillman, I don't know, are you unmuted, Sandy? No. Sandy is our director of our early college initiative at SEL, and she too has long experience in K-12 education, and she has served in many roles from teacher to counselor to building administrators in several different districts. So we bring a wide array of experience to our group. So SEL is an organization, an education nonprofit that is based at the University of Indianapolis, and we've been in business over 20 years. We lead a variety of initiatives across Indiana, and our goal is to assist K through 12 schools with innovative and effective practices that serve all students. And so we also work as a convener and a networker, and we're regarded as neutral in that we are not partisan in any particular way. So that is a brief overview of SEL, but on the next slide, our current initiatives, our initiatives have changed throughout the years. Our longest running initiative is the Early College High School, which has started in 2007 at SEL. Are going across that Indiana PCAP. If you've heard of the P-TECH model, this is the Indiana version. That is one of our newer initiatives, just started with 4 high schools. Our biggest new initiative is the Indiana Literacy Cadre. We're very excited about this. This just doubled the size of our organization. We received a huge grant from the state to launch the Science of Reading in Indiana, and so we are training schools and have coaches throughout the state. We also have an Indiana STEM cadre. I'm the person that's in charge of the Rural Early College Network, and a spin-off that has been our Urban College Acceleration Network, which are networks of high schools around the state that work together to implement early college. Another offshoot of the RECON, or Rural Early College Network, is our Indiana Collaborative for Rural Education. And then we have 2 different programs to help credential high school teachers to teach what we call dual credit in Indiana. The Teach Dual Credit is for the humanities areas, and STEM Teach are for the STEM disciplines. And then we also have 2 other outgrowths, or iSeal and iTel, which are virtual ways for people who want to become licensed as ELL teachers or special ed teachers to take advantage of a very fast but excellent program. Steve? Our experience throughout our time in Indiana has been, at least the three of us, we have all worked in high schools as part of our careers. I was a professor for 13 years in 3 different institutions, so I've got that foot in that door as well. Throughout SEL's existence, I would have to say the majority of our work has focused on high schools in Indiana. We were originally founded by the Lilly Endowment, which is based in Indianapolis, and that was one of their concerns at the time of our founding. We are very boots on the ground in that we go out all over the state and work side by side with administrators, teachers, and counselors as they implement various different initiatives. But we're also fortunate that we have a very close relationship with the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. We have had 1 or 2 people serve on their standing committee, which is the statewide transfer articulation committee, which handles many of the dual credit, dual enrollment issues in our state. There's also a joint committee between our state Department of Education and the commission to have a dual credit committee. And when that is convened, there's always a SEL person that is on that because of our large role in early college around the state. We also have 2 projects funded by the commission, and we are very honored that they have named SEL as the sole organization in Indiana to train, support, and implement early college high schools. So if a school wants to be in early college, they have to go through SEL. Sandy, are you working yet? You're still, so I'm going to have to be Sandy, and Steve's going to have to help me be Sandy at times too. We are so sorry she can't get unmuted right now. We don't know what's wrong.
Oh, wait.
There she is.
I just did.
Good.
Okay.
So next slide, Steve.
So just to add some other key information to what Janet was talking about, in Indiana, all high schools are required to offer at least 2 dual credit courses. Now, the vast majority of our high schools offer a lot more than that, 20 plus, including the CTE dual credits and academic dual credits. The Commission for Higher Ed is now leading an effort to establish the Indiana College Core in all high schools over the next 3 years. And I'm going to explain what the Indiana College Core is here in a minute. So this entails a close relationships between K-12 and the higher ed partners. We are unique in that we have one main community partner across the state, and that is called Ivy Tech Community College. Has over 100,000 students enrolled in a lot of dual credit offerings through Ivy Tech. And but our 3 main higher ed partners in Indiana that offer the Indiana College Core are Ivy Tech, as I just mentioned, and Indiana University, and also Vincennes University, which is a community college over on the southwest side of our state. So a little bit about the Indiana College Core. This really came about in legislatively, I think in 2012. So we have been blessed to have this available to us as we continue to grow dual credit, dual enrollment. So the Indiana College Core is a block of 30 general ed college level dual credits that transfer among all the state universities here in Indiana. There also are a growing number of private universities that will accept the Indiana College Core. So the Indiana College Core is based on competencies, and also it can be earned through a combination of dual credit classes, AP classes, IB, and but at least 15 of those credit hours of those 30 must be dual credit. And then there's an MOU that's developed between the high school and the higher ed institution. So we have a big overarching goal, and that is that all of our students will complete the ICC. And right now we have 141 of our 512 high schools that are ICC delivery sites. And our commission has a really ambitious goal of increasing that by 70% each year until we get all of our schools on board. And so we're really trying to provide an opportunity for our seniors to walk out of high school with a credential. And the credential, the Indiana College Core, is for primarily for students that are maybe seeking a 2-year or a 4-year degree. So now we're going to talk about really from the high school's perspective, what do high schools want and need in a higher ed partner? And I didn't get to introduce myself, so I'll just give you a little quick background. I am a lifetime K-12 person and have been a teacher and a counselor and a high school principal and a middle school principal. And I also have been a director of an early college in a suburban Indianapolis area high school. So what we high schools really need in their higher ed partner, we've got these 6 points here that we're going to talk about. But that good, frequent, and quality communication with the higher ed partner, a knowledgeable staff at the higher ed that will communicate the important information needed for dual credit, how to get enrolled, how to get your teacher's credential, that type of thing. And then a staff that is familiar with the high school, that comes out to the high school and visits with each high school. Of course, the professional development piece can't go unnoticed. And so we really have to make sure that we've got quality opportunities for high school students to learn. And then developing those respectful relationships. I know in some of our early colleges in Indiana, we have employees of the university who spend quite a bit of time in that high school, and they will tell us they just kind of feel like they're part of the high school. And then really, it's a two-way street in terms of high schools learning how colleges operate and colleges learning how high schools operate, because they operate in different ways. Frequently, the high schools their problem-solving ability to pivot when something arises has to be pretty fast. And sometimes the problem-solving timeline in a university is a little bit slower. Okay.
So we want to talk about these points now, better, more timely communication. But before we get to this slide, I think it's worthwhile to point out that in Indiana, we have several different structures of early college high schools. A lot of the states that we have visited, most are either like in North Carolina, where you have early college high schools, which are on campus at a community college, or in Texas, early college high schools are standalones. Most of ours in Indiana exist within the comprehensive traditional high schools. So when we talk about these partnerships and better, more timely communications, we're talking about the high school, which is doing its thing, higher ed, which is doing its thing, and the communication, which is always a good thing to have with professional partners, sometimes is lacking. So what high schools often experience, and I didn't say this, but I was an early college high school principal prior to working at SEL. So what high schools often experience is that the communication isn't timely, meaning that maybe you have a week to turn in your endorsement or your certifications for your teachers. And they maybe the higher ed's known about that for a while, but the high school is just finding out about that. Higher ed lingo, which I can tell you is used with expectation that high schools understand them. There are notes that I take in my last 2 years here at SEL, so I can remember higher ed lingo and therefore be able to speak to it and about it. And the higher ed expectations of the high schools that aren't explained. And what would help? An annual or at least, you know, a semester, a calendar of events. And Janet mentioned, or excuse me, Sandy mentioned Ivy Tech, which is Indiana's community college partner. They put out a calendar by semester where all major events are located, and high schools have access to that, so that helps them to be able to see what it is that they need to get done at what time. Develop a cheat sheet, and I mentioned that personally I had done that, but a cheat sheet developed by higher ed would be absolutely helpful to high schools in addressing some of the needs that they have. Consider creating an MOU between the higher ed partner and the high school. Services, requirements, deadlines, expectations for dual enrollment partnership, and we're going to go back and forth between dual enrollment and dual credit. You know, there's a couple of examples that we can talk about. Grades. So in Indiana, if you have an endorsed, or excuse me, a credentialed high school teacher that is teaching a college course on the high school campus, which means that person has a master's degree in the content area, or a master's degree plus 18 hours in the content area. What happens if the grading scale is different at the higher ed than it is at the high school? With today's master's based or mastering standards or standards-based grades that some places are implementing, there is a little bit of a question on how that translates from a high school transcript to a college transcript. So that would be an example of something that might be listed in an MOU. If an instructor were to become sick or become pregnant, what are the processes that the high school needs to go so that their students aren't being left out in the cold, and how is the higher ed going to respond to that? And those are just a couple of examples of an MOU and how that could be helpful for all that are involved. Memorandum of understanding, and those things, again, in Indiana are sketched out and used, but better, more timely communication would obviously be advantageous, and we feel like it'd be advantageous to both high schools and higher ed. Knowledgeable and dedicated staff. You know, I can speak from experience and in my time as a high school principal, and that we had several higher ed liaisons, and the last one that I was fortunate to work with became part of our team. She was absolutely fantastic and still is where she's located. And those people, those individuals that come from higher ed that have an understanding of the high school and that serve as an outstanding liaison, those folks become, I mentioned just a second ago, part of your team. They become part of the culture of the high school. And that speaks to the importance of early college and how we get students to gain that credential past that high school diploma. Sometimes what high schools experience is a revolving door. Staff who don't know much about the high school, and even then, there's not a hierarchy. So if we have an issue with the person that we're working with, who is it that we go to? What could help? Obviously, over here, a list of who's in charge of dual enrollment with contact info. Plus, you know, if we're going to lose someone, if a high school is going to lose someone, it would be good to know, so there could be planning on both sides. And also training new staff in the nuances of dual enrollment, as well as how to work with high schools and setting up these partnerships. And as we know, programs are great. Everyone means well. We're all educators. The people that are in those positions and things that can help would, again, be beneficial to both sides.
So let's talk a little bit about the dual enrollment liaisons that actually go out to the high school. Sometimes what we hear from our early college partners in Indiana is that they really don't have regular communication, or it's an email or a phone call. And then sometimes also, I know it, as Steve said, everyone means well, but sometimes the approach kind of seems like this is how it will be, rather than listening to the higher or the high school partner in terms of what some of their problems are and seeing if you can't come up with a mutually agreed upon solution to some of those issues. And then sometimes also, if the liaison just pops in on the high school, Steve and I have both been high school principals, and if someone would come in during the time when I had lunch duty, uh, I that happened once actually, and I just took my higher ed liaison with me, and she stood and watch me watch kids eat. And it was, after that, we figured out that we needed a set time that would be on everybody's calendar rather than just a pop in. So that schedule of visits. So what could help with all this is scheduling those visits and also maybe having one visit where the principal and the counselor together are meeting there because the principal may be thinking more of staffing, what dual credit teachers are going to be teaching those courses, whereas the counselor's viewpoint is going to be more on what kids are we putting in those classes. So, and that the last item there is sharing what the higher ed partnership can entail and offer, and then making sure that the needs are met. In our state, there's usually an MOU that's developed, and that, as Steve was talking about that before, that's kind of can be visited annually, but most of them have a 3 to 5 year expansion of time, but the regular annual review of it is very helpful. So professional development, we find that high school teachers really want to see what it's like on campus in that classroom. So, but what often happens is there is not effective or much PD at all. Sometimes we hear that the enrollment offices will come out with some things that need to be done for dual enroll or whatever, but that was kind of like an afterthought. Limited contact with professors in their discipline, that can be an issue. And then, as I said before, not getting to actually go to the campus and see. I know in the northern part of our state, at one of our Ivy Tech campuses, we actually had that campus invited the dual credit teacher to come to campus in the summertime and enroll in the class and take the class themselves. And this was for a beginning teacher. And it really, really, the high school teacher got so much out of that, and it was an effective strategy. And then also sometimes high school teachers have the presentation skills, the interaction skills, the discussion, hands-on type skills, and that sometimes in the university aren't as common because of just numbers of students you have in a class if you're in a larger lecture hall and that kind of thing. So I think high school teachers would like for the university professors to ask how are you presenting that topic? What are some of the activities that you doing? So there can be the learning back and forth. So suggestions, things that might help would be an orientation session for new dual enrollment teachers. Some of our universities actually have a mentor on campus that mentors that beginning dual credit teacher. And then definitely opportunities to interact with a professor in their discipline to share syllabi and materials and resources. And then also open conversation with the campus contact in that discipline in terms of how to use technology, how to set up projects, labs, what's expected, how to make adaptations if the school doesn't have the exact same lab equipment that the university has. So those are some suggestions for professional development, which we all know is really important.
All right. Another area that is mentioned by the high schools we work with is the need for respectful relationships. And what our high schools are saying to us is that sometimes they encounter higher ed folks who seem somewhat disdainful or even dismissive about a high school person's teaching qualifications and or knowledge in their discipline. And then they're also encountering, and this might be related to that, roadblocks to approving a high school teacher's credentials to teach a dual enrollment course. Oftentimes, the process for that credential approval goes to a department chair or a dean, and perhaps it's a one-person decision, and sometimes some additional input might be helpful in that case. And that sometimes high schools feel that dual enrollment is a one-way street, with the higher ed being the one way and the only way. What we know from both our work with higher ed partners as well as high schools is that we do need to acknowledge there's a difference in academic preparation and the teaching experience, but that both high school and higher ed instructors can learn from one another. And one of the best examples in our state is the training that Indiana University offers to the teachers that they credential. They have an extensive workshop. They have time where teachers meet by discipline with the professors from that same discipline, and they have very deep drill down sessions on the syllabus, the units to be taught, the materials to be used, and that program receives rave reviews from both the high school teachers that are participants, as well as the higher ed department chairs and instructors, because they feel confident those teachers now know what is desired and expected from the higher ed perspective. And I think over and over that this just comes down to realizing that both the high school and the higher ed are partners and they're not competing. Again, this goes to the relationship about keeping the student first and at the forefront. We're both there for the same reason. We're trying to help our students grasp the information and be able to pass the course and actually excel in the course if possible. And that's our common mission. And last area is the willingness to learn more about high schools. I know this is a tall order, and this is hard for an individual high school to understand, but we realize that higher ed partners have many high schools that they work with, and it's difficult to get to know each and every one of those. But again, if a liaison from the higher ed has a few high schools to deal with, that helps quite a bit, that at least one person is aware of the high school people on their caseload. And so what the high schools say is there often is a lack of awareness of the difference between the high school calendar and the higher ed calendar, that they don't start at the same time, their breaks aren't always at the same time, that sometimes there's some conflicts just because of those calendar differences. Another difference is the amount of seat time. If a 3-credit course means 3 hours of seat time at the higher ed institution, that's not the same case for a high school, which meets the students every day of the week. And so it might be 4.5 hours per week that the high school sees that student for the same class that on campus is 3 hours. But that also feeds into the next point, which is the high school is also trying to meet graduation requirements with this dual enrollment, dual credit course. And so there are some high school requirements that might be different from what the higher ed expectations are. And so that extra time can be used for that, as well as to provide more support for the high school students. And again, when you think about 15, 16, 17-year-olds attempting college courses, that extra time is very beneficial. So a few suggestions to help with this would be meeting mid-year to prepare for the end of the school year, and especially when we're trying to prepare for transcripts and closing out the academic years. That's very important, but also before the start of the next academic year to be sure registration and staff are all lined up. It would be helpful to discuss that seat time in high school and how could it be used to supplement the higher ed course curriculum from the higher ed perspective. And the thing that we love in our state is that we have a crosswalk of how the high school courses match the higher ed courses for transfer. This crosswalk in Indiana lists every higher ed institution in terms of what they expect and what the course numbers will be. And in turn, it has the course numbers at the high school level. So that's very helpful for both sides to see that. And it also helps everyone understand high school graduation requirements as well. So
Janet,
uh-huh.
Janet, if I could add here, there was a comment in the chat from Madeline that if the high school teacher goes through the same credentialing process as the on-campus instructor, that there should not be any difference in their qualifications. And I know also most high school teachers that have their master's in the content, or they have their master's plus 18 hours in the content. They still they love their content and they want to learn more. And the great way to do that is with communication with their partner at the university.
True. Thanks, Sandy. To wind up our presentation, just to point out the benefits of our high school and higher ed partnerships. This is really a win-win for both parties. It improves high school graduation and improves college going rates. But we've also seen over and over that strong dual credit, dual enrollment programs or early colleges help with higher ed retention and completion. And those are metrics that everybody is striving so hard to improve. If your state has performance funding, which Indiana does for both high schools and higher eds, good success on those metrics can also improve funding for the institution. It also helps more students choose to pursue a college education, especially those underserved targeted populations who didn't even think this was a possibility, but they are also better prepared for the rigor of higher ed and come into the university in much better shape than if they were to come in cold. We also find that more underserved students are entering the college pipeline because of these programs, and that is something that all of higher education is very much wanting to attract those populations. And then we've also seen many spin-offs of other ways that partnerships can happen between the high school and the higher ed partner, other projects they can work on because they've had this initial partnership with dual credit and dual enrollment. That is it for our presentation. If you have any questions for us, here's our contact information. I think we're out of time, but if anybody wants to fire a question to us quickly, please put it in the chat room and or ask us if you can be unmuted. I don't know if you can for that. Thank you everybody for your time and attention. We sure appreciate it. We know we had folks from over 15 states in this session, and we are so tickled you waited for us to start and stuck with us till the end. Thank you so much for your time and attention.